Hello, everybody. Let's call it Pokin the Bear instead of what's happening. What's happening is so ball and so ball. What's happening is so dull and meh that we can do better. And last week, after I recorded the episode, my wife was wondering what I talked about, and I was like, well, kids, sharks, Biden's age, war, CIA, Conor McGregor, and lion's mane mushrooms. And she was like, man, you're poking all the bears. I was like, you know what? Actually, not bad. I am poking the bears a little bit. Poking the bears. I like to poke the bears a little bit. And I was like, let's just call it that, let's just call it that. Poking the bear. Poking the bear, episode 3. Hair, it's going away. It's ridiculous. Look how long it's gotten. I mean, it's almost shoulder length and it's super thick and super long. And this week I had them cut on the side just here because I don't like it when it gets too fluffy on the sides, and it looks ridiculous. And I'm tired of it. It's too long. It's too heavy. I'm buzzing it all off in the next day or two. My wife doesn't know it yet. She's going to hate it, but she'll be fine. Mikhaila Peterson, this week released on her podcast that recently, it sounded like in the last quarter, in the last 4 months, she had a real experience with Jesus Christ and feels like she experienced salvation and redemption and a relationship that she hadn't experienced before. And she felt like she was visited by the Holy Spirit. And, really, that's about all I heard. I only heard the first 3-4 minutes of her podcast where she started talking about it. So I think she talks more about it in depth a little bit into her episode, but I haven't seen any of that. But, from what little I heard of her, it sounded like, hey, that's what I believe. I know what you're saying. I resonate with that. I have experienced that too. Like that is what I think is happening in terms of like what's out there and how we got here and the issues of good and evil in this world and how the redemption of all things and how things are gonna go, basically like on forever, like in terms of what's next and when we die, and like how does this all work, and what does the Bible say about that, and what's Jesus' role in that, and what do I believe in that, and you know yeah, I resonate because that's exactly what I believe, so that's just kind of, it's cool when like I guess someone with Michaela's, because there's been some questions, I think, right? Like I've heard some questions in the past, like I started hearing them, I feel like around 2016, like, hey, Jordan Peterson, like what's he believe, and I think I'm not sure that he really did believe too much in line with like the Christian faith at that time, but then it seemed to sort of be like changing over time. And then there was kind of this definitely time period where like he was saying enough for the Christian things that, you think, okay, that's where he's arrived at, um, and that may have happened for him already or may not, I'm not sure, or his wife. It could very well, I just don't know. But Mikhaila experienced that. And so yeah, it's just cool to see like that level of clarity, I guess. And and I think partly because that's what I believe, and so there's a resonance there, and also partly because, hey, as far as I can tell, like that's what's true, So I guess in some sort of way, it almost kind of feels like Mikhaila found the truth, But you may disagree, like you may not believe that, and that's fine. I'm not going to like try to, you know, convince you to believe what I believe. It's just that's what I feel like is going on. Trump on the All In podcast. The All In podcast, if you have not heard any of their episodes yet, you might want to check it out. It's by far my most favorite recent podcast. They started podcasting, the All In guys, in the last a couple years, right? 2-3 years, I believe, 4 years tops. But I think it might be, they might have started in 2020. It could be. Time's going fast. But only in the last few years they've started up weekly episodes. They drop like on Friday or something over the weekend. 4 guys, always kind of Zoom calling in together, and usually they're like 90-minute episodes. And it's tech, finance, economy, what's going on, some political stuff, science, technology. That's kind of the core thing. If I didn't mention that, I think I did already. And the little thing is poker. Like that's how they started playing, got on this podcast together, because they're playing poker together. So then there's some of that incorporated. 2 of them are billionaires. The other 2 are doing just fine. They're all in the tech space. They're all kind of on the inner workings of Silicon Valley. They're all super smart, super successful, just well-spoken guys. It's kind of cool to like see that view into their world, which you do get a little bit if you follow the All In podcast. So it's the only podcast that I listen to every single episode of. So I listen to the All In podcast every single week. Don't miss a week. I just, really, really like it. And it feels like a good source of information. It feels like these guys are reading the world as they see it. They're talking about it. They disagree, 2 of them, David Sachs and Chamath Palihapitiya, would have full on endorsed Trump. Jason Calacanis and David Freeberg, I think he, is a little bit undecided right now. He's, was thinking probably not, but then they had Trump on their podcast, and I'm not sure where he lands right now. I just don't think Jason Calacanis could ever vote for Trump, and you know what? He doesn't have to. Like that's his decision to make. But they have differing, political viewpoints among all 4 of them for sure. That's fascinating. It's fascinating to see how much common ground they actually do have, and that's encouraging, actually. And then you get to see into the world of tech. And anyhow, fantastic podcast. And Jason Calacanis comes from media. He's a fantastic moderator. He's great with words. He knows how to keep the conversation going and how to bring enthusiasm to it. Early stage investor in a ton of startups, you name it, he might have been involved with it to some degree. And some of the big ones too, like Uber, I think is the more notable one. And David Freeberg is kind of scientist of him. He was at Google, and he is now starting another company. He's done investing also. He's the most vocal one about voicing his concern for the economic state of the United States of America and where things are at fiscally, how things are going with budgeting, our deficits that we're continuing to incur, what's going on with the dollar. He's very, very concerned about that, almost probably above everything else. He's very concerned where he sees the financial trajectory of this country going, and, on the right and the left. But anyhow, so that's his kind of big concern when it comes to politics, really. And then Chamath Palihapitiya, billionaire, Facebook, and social capital now, very successful investor and capital allocator, and but made his money for like a 5 to 7 year stint at Facebook. I mean, it's crazy. He just crushed it, and it was the right time and the right thing going on, and boom, billionaire. So good for him. I mean, he definitely earned it all. He's brilliant. Chamath is my, can we have a favorite? Chamath is my favorite. I just like Chamath. I like the way he thinks about the success that he's had. I like the way he tends to kind of think about the world. I like the way he tends to think about how things work, and that he is, calm and collected and reasonable. And then the facts are just going to be where the facts lie, And so if he surveys the landscape and has been sort of, Democrat his whole life, and was not necessarily for Trump, but now with the information at hand, he's like, you know what, Trump is just the better choice. That's just what it is. Maybe at first glance that puts me in with an unpopular crowd, but that's just where I see the truth lie. And so that's how Chamath will be. He'll follow the facts. And so, yeah. And, he seems to be living a lifestyle that's just fantastic. I mean, of course, it probably would be if you're private jet, flying your private jet and you have a chef at home. And, the life of a billionaire is different. It's really different. I mean, your whole world is just, it's just very different, at that level of wealth, which good on them. You know what I mean? Like there's differences across the spectrum in life, and that's just the way it is. Like that's, I don't hold that against him. That's just is what it is. I mean, when your net worth's over $1 billion and things are going great, your lifestyle is just, it's very different, so it's kind of cool getting an insight into how he's choosing to sort of structure his life inside that system of wealth. And I'm like, you know what, man, I see why you're doing that. I love that. So anyway, that's Chamath's, my favorite. And, David Sachs, one of the part of the PayPal mafia back in the day with Elon Musk. And, oh man, all those people just did so well with that whole thing. He was in on that and then has done other startups since. And, I believe he's the other billionaire, if I'm not mistaken. And he's gotten more vocal with his views on politics in the last couple of years. And it's been really interesting to follow him because he also is like reading the world and just sharing what his thoughts are on it. And, he shares his thoughts on more like kind of inner political things than definitely the other three guys do. But it seems like it's become sort of an area of interest for him and, and increased involvement in it. And that's also interesting to see how he's choosing to spend, time and resources and what he's given attention to at that level. It could be anything, but he's kind of choosing for that to be politics more. And he's very active on X. I just follow him on X. I like to check in on him every, whatever it is, week, every few days. It definitely my use is on X. Sometimes it'll go weeks and I don't even open the app. So I'm pretty sporadic on that. But it really, for me, comes more down to like sometimes like, all right, I want to kind of check up now. Let's get an update on where things are at, what's going on, and to see it from his point of view. So he's one of the Twitter feeds that I check back into probably more frequently than any other. So his thoughts are fascinating, and he would be the most, I guess, sort of vocally aligned with the Republican Party in general, and would self-identify maybe as a conservative, or I mean, that's just that's my guess. And he's vocal and is not afraid to share his opinions on that. So anyhow, they had Trump on the podcast, and I would encourage you, if you haven't seen that, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it really was great. I watched it twice. And, this is a big deal for them. Like they're only a few years into this podcast and it's obviously going great. And it's like I think in the top 10 podcasts pretty consistently now. So, things are going their way. They have a ton of tailwind with the podcast in general and it's crushing and they're having fun with it, I think. But they're not like, CNN or Fox News where they just get to have the president on, So they had David Sachs and Chamath Palihapitiya had a fundraiser for Trump in, I believe it was San Francisco, right? A few weeks ago. And that kind of caught national press. And they had him at David Sachs's house. I think it was Chamath Palihapitiya's first time meeting him. I'm not sure about David Sachs, if he'd met him before or not. I feel like he would have at some point, but I'm not sure. He might not have. But I feel like he would have. And so they had Trump over at their house, at Sachs's house, and had a fundraiser. And apparently it was super successful. And there's a lot of tech people kind of really either warming up to Trump or outright endorsing Trump. It's really fascinating to see this right now, because this is somewhat unusual for the tech community to be this outspoken for a conservative candidate, they tend to either not voice an opinion, or if they are, it would tend to be more for the left historically. And it's just interesting to see a lot of the founder and CEOs in the Silicon Valley world coming out and endorsing Trump now. And, a lot of that's happening on X. But anyhow, my point being, it was a big deal for them, So they took the opportunity seriously. They were very well prepared. They had a fantastic format. It wasn't stiff. They all got to ask questions. They got to engage in conversation. Trump did great. I mean, Trump did fantastic. I mean, he he had great, you know, he had great answers to their questions for the most part. And the thing I would, that as I think back on like what Trump said, it's just the thing is like there's very little that he said that I would disagree with. Maybe some of it, maybe I would, maybe some of it, I don't know, but in general, like, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. It makes sense. I feel like I see a lot of the same stuff, so eh, that, yeah, so I felt like Trump had good answers. It was a great podcast. And then the thing that you should definitely like hang around for is the after Trump conversation, the after banner. And I think Trump was on for like 60 minutes and they talked amongst themselves like 20 minutes. And listen to that too, because it's fascinating to hear them talk amongst themselves, having had that experience hearing directly with Trump. The one thing that Chamath has said is that he feels like he was led to believe certain things about Trump from the mainstream news and the mainstream narrative for a long period of time. And he sort of kind of just believed that was true. And then started to see more and more when he got information firsthand how less and less of that was true. And more of what he was seeing firsthand seemed actually things that he could support. And his perception of Trump started to change as that process occurred. And so, he believes like you're led to believe a certain thing about Trump. And when you get to meet him, or you get to know him, or you get to spend time with him, if you get to hear him, see how he engages with you, with other people, how does he handle himself? What are his answers to the questions? Does he, all these things, like Chamath is coming to the conclusion that how things are is not how he was led to believe that things are. And as he can read it himself, being this so close to the action, this seems like something he could support. So that was interesting to see that. And I guess that's just interesting for me to see that when Chamath says that, because I feel like I resonate with that a little bit. Like I didn't follow politics at all until 2020. So like Trump, gets elected. I'm barely paying attention, I, and have had known who Trump was. I don't think I've watched any of his shows. Read a book or two of his. I think my dad actually had a book. I don't know which one, but one of his books from the early days, and read it. And I think I read that, and then maybe another one or two business books that he'd written. But that was my only, that was, I knew him as a business person and author, I guess, a good deal maker is what I kind of understood him to be. But then, 2016 happens, and there seems to be a lot of like, I just wasn't paying attention to politics that much. So I knew it was causing a lot of stirs, and, a lot of, it seems sort of inflammatory for some reason. It seems sort of combustive over that time. And, when you just aren't paying that much attention to politics in general, you only catch kind of the top end of things, like you just know about, like, there seems like there's drama, and it just seemed like it was kind of explosive between him and Hillary. And then too, like the so then but then the media is telling you a certain thing, and I believe it to be true. Like I'm not paying attention, started to feel very differently about what the media was saying, and how much of that I should just believe outright coming across from mainstream news sources. There again, I think conspiracy, whatever, and but yeah, what I noticed about, I guess the other thing that rose to my level of awareness with Trump was all his supporters, and the supporters were interesting because there was a lot of them, and they seemed very passionate, and it kind of seemed like, you know, they were believing like that whatever was going on there actually was really important, and that there was kind of actually a lot on the line, and that there actually is corruption throughout our institutions. That actually is a thing, and it's uh it's it's dangerous. If it gets too much, it reaches a tipping point and it becomes dangerous. Like there is corruption out there, and no, you can't just trust that everything the CIA is going to do on its own, or some of these other governmental agencies, is fine. You can't just assume that they don't need clear oversight, and just all these things they seem like passionate about. Like it was almost like they were seeing something that I was not seeing. I was not seeing that. Like, you know, I thought you could trust what the news would say, and I thought you could trust the government, and I thought you could trust all these, the what they're saying, like in terms of national health, and they know what they're talking about, right? You can trust it. So that was more my stance back then, and would have been happy that Trump won the election for sure, because I grew up more conservative, more kind of right leaning, even though our my family, our people, the way we grew up, we didn't vote. So we didn't vote, but we paid attention to politics. We knew what was going on, and our background tends to favor, you know, the we prefer the government to be no bigger than it needs to be. That's our preference, and that includes state government and it includes federal government. And the state government, we have a little bit more leniency with. We have a little bit more, I guess, maybe sort of, hey, you make your decision. If I don't like it, I can always move. A little bit more there. But our people, the way we grew up with our friends and family, we in that culture, we have a pretty strong distrust of the federal government. It's just sort of baked in, and it's not distrust as in like, we're not going to do what you say. It's not that. It's just, we get why you're here. You're here to protect us, and you're here to make the system work the best it can across all states, economically, etc. And you're here to advance our interests in this world. And that's about it. And however big it needs to be for that, cool. But let's not make it bigger than that. So that's our general culture stance, and that's certainly my stance. So I could hear enough what was going on in 2016 that I would have more aligned with what Trump was saying back then than Hillary, pretty considerably. But in terms of like, Trump and who he was and how he was going to govern, I just wasn't paying attention. And, definitely did think one thing of Trump. And I wasn't opposed, but he wasn't my favorite, He wasn't like my favorite president ever. I haven't had that many. I'm almost 40, but I just wasn't. Maybe if I had made a list like, well, who are my favorite presidents? Let's really think about this, and let's actually go back to look at what they did, and what if we made that list anywhere between 2016 and 2020, maybe I would have picked Trump. I have no idea. I wasn't thinking in those terms at all, but I was hearing plenty of negative stuff, and you know, just believe most of it, I guess. And then just kind of seeing from what happened in 2020. So that's when I started to get like interested, like what's going on in politics, like what is happening, because this is crazy. This is like, now they're revealing their hand. Now they're showing us their playbook. Now this is more like out in the light. Now this is more like, this is in the wide open, and the overreach and the corruption and the manipulation and the vested interests and the lobbying and on, the mainstream news narrative, and seeing the government get involved with technology and actually get involved with some of our biggest communication mediums like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Google, how we search things on the internet, like the government starting to get involved with all of that. And that all cuts basically one way, and it's against the right and it's for the left. Like that's how the censorship works at all those places. It's changed now at X since Elon bought it, but you know, the FBI's in there telling them what you can post on Twitter and what you can't, and covering up stuff on social media like the Hunter Biden laptop, and then what they did with COVID and how kind of weird that whole thing was, and how the government got with the media and kind of conspired together and passed their narratives back and forth, and the news media just did what told us what the government told them to tell us, and then you get people owning these news stations, and then they're filtering the stories in a way that works for their personal political preference too. So they're kind of, so then you get these news channels that are like clearly biased, one way or the other. And yeah, really COVID was like, okay, now then I started to pay attention. So the the QAnon stuff, that was my biggest sort of problem with Trump, I guess. And the QAnon thing was fascinating. And, this HBO documentary Into the Storm was just fantastic. I watched it a long time. I watched it soon after it came out, and it was great because it took a behind the scenes look at QAnon, and it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And, if that was what was behind QAnon, then it was just a crazy sort of thing. And lots of what they were saying was true, and some of it was crazy, and it was all mixed together. And someone was working this grand plan, to get people hyped up about this QAnon thing. I mean, we do forget, but it was a pretty strong, almost cultish sort of following. And again, a lot of what they were saying turned out to be true, but some of it was crazy, and it was hard to differentiate between the true and the crazy. And the truth is, some percent of people, 20-30%, I don't know, of all of the QAnoners, not even all the MAGA people, because I assume there were some MAGA people that weren't necessarily into QAnon, but in the small group of like here's what it is. I think for some reason, whether it's because of the content they have from Trump and how they slice and dice and manipulate that content, or beef it up, so to speak, juice it up, if you will, and then choose to give it to us, if that is what creates the Trump derangement syndrome, or is it just that, they are, or is it just that comes directly from Trump, and the news outlets have nothing to do with tweaking that energy flow or whatever that is, that understanding of communication, or the effect that Trump has on people, whether they have had no impact on that, and Trump derangement syndrome basically comes straight from Trump. I mean, those are the two options, really, as I see it. It got like 20% of the people, right? I mean, it did make some people crazy, and half those people that it made crazy were on the left, and half those people that it made crazy were on the right, probably 30%. for some reason. And yeah, I do think the news media had a lot to do with that. I really do. I really do. I mean, I think that including stuff like QAnon and some of these things, I mean, it did make some people crazy. Whether you can just all blame that on Trump, though, I don't know. I just feel like that inner, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I just feel like that inner communication medium had something to do with that. So, um, yeah. So then I guess when I started to learn more about the truth of all that too, and yeah, I just started to, um, realize, oh, what I had believed of him at one time is not true. I can see that now. That's one thing I know for sure. Pretty sure. It seems pretty clear. And then we can, then we can focus on, well, what is he saying, and how do I think about that as opposed to my other option, on the other side. So Trump on the All In podcast, definitely check that episode out. I think you'll like it. Tonight is the debate. Why are we having a debate? It's still summertime. It's the middle of the summer. We have not even celebrated our country's birthday, and we're having a presidential debate. What is happening? It's still June. Like, this is so early. And presidential debates are so fun. I can't wait. It's coming out in just an hour or two. So I'm recording this literally right before the debate. Too bad we can't do it after. Whatever, it is what it is. But tonight is the first presidential debate, and these are so fun. I remember the first one being back when I was probably college age, but wasn't in college. We went to the local community college, and they were showing the debate at the college. And I think some of my friends were in school or something, or knew of it or whatever. And it was awesome. I just remember that. I think it was Bush Gore. I think, was that everything? Did W ever debate Al Gore? I think so. And I think it was that one was the first one that I remember. And they're just, excuse me, they're just fun to watch. Even like not being super into politics. Just kind of catching the high points. The debates were interesting because it's like you get some showmanship, you get some entertainment, you get to hear about like how these leaders that are trying to be elected think about the world, what they're paying attention to domestically, what they're paying attention to internationally, how they feel about the other party, where they think this all should go. It's fun to watch the debates, right? Super fun. So I'm excited about it tonight. It'd be curious to see how it goes. How does it go? I think they've definitely been setting the expectations low. Trump and others on the right have been setting the expectations. They have been setting expectations, resetting expectations, keeping expectations low. Look, Biden is he has his moments, but he's going to come out swinging. And Biden's won a debate with shoot, not Paul Rand. Doggone it, I can't remember his name. I can see his face. I'd kind of forgotten about him, but I know he was pretty sharp too. And he kind of seemed to fade off there. But anyhow, that guy, and them just saying, hey, Trump won that debate. Trump was like, he's never seen the other guy who I can't remember his name drink so much water. He just can't believe. So Trump must not like that guy. So and Trump was saying that recently. So like they're trying to like, hey, it's not like Trump's just going to come out and murder here, and Biden's going to fall over dead. That is probably not what's going to happen. And Trump or Biden's going to be well rested. He's going to be very well prepared. Will he or will he not be slip the questions ahead of time? Who knows? I mean, it is CNN. I mean, there's no misunderstanding about where they stand politically and what the candidate that they want to see advanced. And, they're hardcore, like, they'll just blatantly, they don't hide the fact that they are anti-Trump, anti-conservative, pro, left, and Biden is still by far the superior choice over Trump. I mean, they're clear with that, and they're the ones hosting the debate. So it's just interesting to see like what will happen here. How will it be perceived? I kind of feel like if Biden just doesn't do one of his going to shipping the trillion, if he doesn't do one of those and he just speaks semi clearly and or does, and his face doesn't fall down on the podium and just face plant on the podium halfway through, or if he doesn't lock up, like kind of get bent forward and kind of lock up and just sort of not know what to do or where to go, or if he's coming out or going in, if he doesn't look all hunched over and like shuffling like super old and like, man, I don't know if he can get onto the stage or get off the stage. Like, if none of that happens, then I think they're going to say Biden won. I just think that's what's going to happen here. But anything could happen. But I expect Biden to do fine, honestly. I mean, I think he can. Look, they're going to have him juiced up. He's going to be well rested. He's going to be well prepared. It's only 90 minutes. There's not a live crowd. There's only TV, that's only being recorded. So there's no one there except the moderators. The moderators are on your side. There's no questions about that whatsoever. How much will that affect their moderating? We'll see. We're about to find out. But there's no question. The moderators are on Biden's side. And I think it'll be fine, honestly. I just don't expect disaster to strike for Biden. I mean, I think, but I just hope we get to substance, and content. That'd be wonderful, because that'd be great. So we'll see. But yeah, when I was thinking about the debates a little bit, and just thinking about I guess I was thinking about like, well, what in my mind then are the disqualifying sort of proof points, the disqualifying factors of, say, Trump? Because there seems to be some remaining for some people, and a lot of people. And I'm not talking about like the people that just will support the Democratic Party, whatever, because those people exist and they have a right to that opinion. Those people exist on the right also, so they're that, whether that's half the country, whatever that is, like if you're just left politically and you're going to vote blue no matter who, then, I get that. But people that would support Trump's policies and would generally support sort of the right in general, maybe more centrist, but still right. And even the people even more on the right politically, some of them would still disqualify, I think, in their mind, Trump. And I assume for them that would mean Trump over Biden. Like, those really are the two choices. So, or that's just going to how it's play out. But if you want to like people, yeah. So like, what are those? What are what are they saying? I'm just curious. Like, what are they seeing there that would disqualify Trump based on what we've seen? And they have the right to their own opinion. So that I'm not trying to change their opinion. Like, they have the right to that opinion. For me, this is more like, oh, okay, well, should I have that opinion too? And okay, well, let's just think about it then. So and thinking about it in terms of like, these are our two choices, right? Like, if you want to, that's just kind of how it's going to be. Like, if you wanted to vote Bobby Kennedy, because he would be the one you would support the most, but you still sort of understand Bobby Kennedy's not getting elected, that is fine. That's cool that we have that in our democracy. And I think there's even more on the ballot, and you can vote for one of those, and you can vote for, in theory, you should be able to vote for whoever you want in this country, right? So that's kind of cool. So I wouldn't want to try to really change that for anyone else, but yeah, like, what are those reasons that they believe would disqualify Trump, and would I happen to, sort of write him off personally also, even though he might align closer with my beliefs. Um, so like, what are those things? So just thinking about it, I would think about, okay, inciting this sort of allegation of inciting racial violence. Okay. Trump incited racial violence. That would be a reason that would disqualify him. I think what's it seems like has become a little bit more clear is that there was definitely clips structured a certain way, and we were definitely led to believe a certain thing about Trump's propulsion of the racial violence. And I guess I honestly, I guess I believed part of it at the time, but then you realize and you see in hindsight and you see more what he was saying, and you see the full video instead of just the clip. And then you start to wonder, like, well, I don't know how much of this whole thing about inciting racial violence is actually even true, to the facts of it. And the another one, okay, Russia collusion. Like, if he was colluding with Russia, that would, you know well, shoot, if he was colluding with Russia, would I still think Biden's a better choice? I don't know. I don't know. It might not disqualify me in my mind. um but turns out that was all zero, nothing behind that. And boy, they tried hard, and it's all we heard about for 3 years straight. QAnon, I just don't think Trump was responsible for QAnon. I just don't. you know did he play to it sometimes? Did he use it to his advantage? I I think he probably did. I would assume so, like that. He's just gonna do that. But did he create it? Was he behind it? Can it be blamed on him? I don't think so. Inciting January 6th, you know that was a big allegation. And at the time, I probably believed that he certainly did incite some of that or whatever. But again, that was at the beginning of me even paying attention. And turns out they've looked it all over and back and forth. And I mean, they got him on felonies for the way he put a payment in his accounting. It didn't have to do with allegedly having sex with a porn star, which I assume was, if it happened, was totally consensual. And it may or may not have happened. I don't know. But I know that's an allegation. And then paying hush money over, what was it, 34 payments or 32 payments. And so every time a payment hits, and that's what you do with hush money, you don't pay it out at once because then they might just talk. You pay it out over time. And the problem's not with hush money. People do that all the time. That's totally legal. That's above board. They got him for how he recorded these payments in his accounting. And that just seems heavy-handed, kind of unprecedented. It seems a little, and when you look at the case and kind of how it's gone, and some of the things that are already coming out about it, and sort of the vested interests and the motivations, and the potential impact that this could have on the election, frankly, it really could. I mean, good grief. And is this the first time that major things have happened that caused the election to go one way and certain another? No, it's not. That happened in 2020. Trump would have absolutely been president for another 4 years if it wasn't for COVID. And, I'm not saying they went out there and let the gates go on COVID on purpose, but man, it did work to their advantage. Big time. Big time. So, yeah. So don't you think that they would have gotten him for January 6th, if there was actually something there? And so that to me would seem like, the whole how you recorded things long, long, long time ago in your accounting, man, if that's the level they're at to try to get something on him, then I'm assuming, they're having a hard time coming up with real proof that he incited January 6th. And, we were told a certain thing about that. And then you realize, there's a lot of questions around January 6th. There's a lot of questions here. I don't think we know kind of all what went down, but it wasn't what we were led to believe at the time. So, okay, so it doesn't disqualify him for that. moral arguments. Some people would make the moral argument like character matters, um, and you sort of use the argument that they will choose to, and maybe we should also um, take our perception of Trump's morality or character and disqualify him for that. And the thing is, I just don't know. I mean, you have to forgive me for this because I don't know Trump. Like maybe they know something that I don't know. That would cause them to write him off morally. I think it's important to leave personal preferences aside or personality differences aside. But in terms of like, um, I guess how I think about that one is again, they may know something that I don't know, um, and that may cause me to write them off too. But I think I'd probably know it. I think I'm paying enough of attention, and but anyhow, yeah, I'd just be kind of curious, like what exactly they would write off, and how much of that would they still write off um, if they did not have any other filters in their perception, because definitely there's definitely a never Trump crowd, and look, they have the right to be. I'm not they have the right to be, but there's definitely a crowd in the even Christian circles that are just not gonna be able to get behind Trump, and they'll oppose him, kind of even with like Joe Biden on the other side and what's going on, and how all that's going and the impact that's having on the world and our country here. They'll still, basically say without saying that, yeah, that Biden is still the better choice. And that's just tough for me. I think I also think so. That's kind of one thing, but then the other thing is just I just don't know. Like I don't know how morally good Trump is. I don't know how morally good Biden is. Um, I don't I don't know if it's our well, we're just never gonna know, even if we wanted to know, right? I mean, that's just how that works. That's a thing of morality. God knows, God knows. There's no doubt about that. God knows. Um, but the other thing too is, it, am I prepared to make the case that uh, that Biden is morally superior to Trump? You know, um, and I don't know if I don't know. Maybe he is. I don't think I'd be able to make that case, with the information I have at hand. So I think the moral argument for some, if that means you sort of remove, Trump from your category of options, I think you'd certainly have a right to that. I think I don't think I've sort of seen. I'm not so sure that immorality, you know, I think that probably exists probably on both sides to some degree. Um, his felony conviction, do I think that should write him off? No, I don't. We just talked about that for a little. I think the felony convictions for what they got him for is ludicrous. I think it's silly. I think it's never really happened before. It's just so clearly motivated, and the timing is so well planned, and just the shit show that's been going on behind that case. And it's just I think it's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the state of our democracy. I think it's unfortunate for our morale. I think it's unfortunate for people seeing hope in the country, and kind of a better day. And or just think like, no, here's what it is. It's we still want to believe that there's a difference between the laws in our country and politics, and that those are still two very separate government, you know, um, government institutions. They don't intermingle. The president doesn't have power over, how court cases turn out and which court cases are brought to bear, and how the legal system tilts one way or the other. And we would like to think the president wouldn't. We like separation of power in this country, and that's for really good reason. And so, you know, it seemed like with that case, like there was a lot of that behind it. It just seemed like that. So yeah, is Trump a felon? Sure. Is he a convicted felon right now? I guess technically, sure. how much of that felony conviction do I think is legit and how much do I think is bullshit? I think it's just bullshit. I think it's silly. But I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe how you record things and in your accounting system is such a big deal, and it definitely warrants a felony. I don't. Hey, maybe, maybe if that's what's tough about this, right? You got to use the information you have at hand. Inappropriate speech, I wouldn't write Trump off for that. I think his speech is different than a lot of people are used to. I was just rewatching some of the Trump Hillary debate from 2016, the first one. And man, if you just had more time, it's really fascinating to go back and listen to what they were talking about in 2016, to see what was at the top level of concerns for Trump and Hillary, and to hear them talk about it, and to see in hindsight, like what was going on in the world back then. And Trump was asked a question on, was it Soleimani or someone else that was this up and coming terrorist, and what would Trump do about that? And the guy was wreaking havoc at the time. And Trump, what would you do about that? Hillary, what would you do about that? And then to see that question get asked the two of them back in 2016, when no one knew what Trump would do or what Hillary would do or what would happen with this guy, one way or the other, among the two. And then here's this big issue. And then, you see later, Trump handled it. It's kind of cool to see that, see it in hindsight. So, even if it would have been Hillary's side, it just would have been kind of cool to see, they said they were going to do this thing, and okay, now it's 2024. We know that 6 years ago, whenever they did that thing, and he got it done. Good for them. So anyhow, but it was cool to see what the two of them were talking about, and one of the things that he said in that one of those debates, I think this was even before the Hillary debate, when they were debating among the Republican Party, was like, hey, your speech is and it's not what we're used to. It's inappropriate. It's offensive. And he was basically like, hey, the whole politically correct thing is bullshit. And he's going to speak from a position of truth and strength and openness and brashness. And yeah, and you might not like it, but a lot of people want it now. And so, and he called it, we were pretty politically correct back in 2016. I mean, you might not, not remember, but yeah, Trump was a shock to the system. But I don't know that his speech is different. It's different than what a lot of people are probably used to. And I could see, some people not liking it just to the level of personality, but I don't know that it necessarily comes from an evil place or comes from a place of darkness necessarily. It's just how he talks, so, and so it was different, but I wouldn't be able to write him off for that. Wouldn't be able to write him off for COVID. Then I was thinking, well, then what would be okay, so Biden, what for me would be the biggest challenges of seeing Biden, because we saw 4 years of Trump and now we've saw 4 years of Biden. What would be those things? Afghanistan withdrawal. Would that for me, if everything else in his presidential term went perfect, just so smooth, awesome, would the Afghanistan withdrawal for me be man, I just can't vote for this guy again because that happened? I mean, when you think about how all that went down, I mean, certainly the shit show that it was and the loss of life, it was terrible. People falling off of airplanes, the Taliban taking back over, beatings, killings, rapings, just all that happening, and just the turmoil and the people that support us getting killed, and all the military equipment left behind, and just the sort of embarrassment that whole thing was. I mean, yeah, that's, man, if everything else in his term went perfectly, I don't know. That's a big stain. I mean, and that directly comes back to the president. I mean, if the president has one job, it's going to be something like that, that's clearly this is your responsibility. Of all the things, the running of the military is one of the most important things that falls directly to the president, within checks and balances, of course, but still, that's where the accountability ends. The border, the border alone, everything else was going perfectly. Not a problem, not a single problem. Everything else perfect. Have no problem with this presidency, but the border. Yeah, the border would the border would disqualify him for me. I mean, the border is a complete and utter disaster. I mean, it is. You can't just let people walk into the country. That's not what you do. Like, bring a bunch of people in and have them go through a legal process and bring them. It's the coolest thing about America is we're all here. We're all here together. People come from everywhere, you know, and some people can't get in and other people it takes way long. And some people get in for some period of time. They got to go back and come back. And eventually they get to be here. And most people can't afford it. Right. So, and some people, most people maybe don't even want to be here, but the people that want to be here, you go through this legal process and you come and we do this thing together. It's awesome. Like that's the coolest, one of the coolest things about America. So yes to all that, but no, you can't just walk in. You can't just let anyone walk in. I mean, that's just, and we're seeing what's happening. So, and I think it's one of the biggest things going on right now. So yeah, the border alone would disqualify. So I think I'm a questionable on the Afghanistan withdrawal, a definite on the border. The Ukraine war, disqualify. It. This war is at Biden's feet. I mean, the thing that this is actually the narrative that some people still believe. It's hard to believe, but they have a right to it. But when Putin invaded Ukraine, there would have been households all across this country where good, you know, smart, paying attention, well-meaning families would have went to church that morning, came home, and been at the lunch table together. And one of the kids asks, you know, why did Russia invade Ukraine? And you know, there were answers that was because Putin's an evil man. Putin's an evil man. You know, he's evil. He's a killer. He's a monster. He's monstrous. He's he's evil, and he will attack everything that he can, and he will take over everything he can, and he will basically, you know, use opportunities to kill people. And he's an evil. Putin's evil. That's why Russia invaded Ukraine. And you know, did I think some of that was true at the time? Yeah, I did. And then not too long in, just started to hear these rumblings of like, what's going on with NATO? We told them that we wouldn't get any closer to Russia with NATO. And we told them that back in the 60s, and we knew this was going to be a huge problem. And this was a big deal for them. They you know, they call it the red line. Like, this is the red line, and let's have this agreement. And even NATO's fine. You can have NATO. Actually, can we join NATO? How about we join NATO? Can't join NATO. Okay, so we're definitely going to be adversaries then. We kind of have to be in that regard. So then you do your thing, we do ours. Here's the red line. NATO cannot get closer to us from that red line, and we've just been getting closer and closer this whole time. And then it was very clear for a couple years that NATO cannot be in Ukraine. Putin's been clear on this. Russia's been clear on this. The people that used to talk to each other in diplomacy for decades have been very, very clear on this. NATO cannot be in Ukraine. And what do? We keep getting closer and closer. And we look like we're going to get into Ukraine. And the vice president of the United States of America tells the world that we're going to get Ukraine into NATO. And the president is saying it, and they're all saying it. And this is the thing you cannot do. And so could that have more to do with why this war was started than simply Putin's evil? Could it be that in a way, over decades, like boiling a frog in water, that we caused the Ukraine war? Could it be that we were just over there meddling and had our fingers into things and had a planned outcome for Ukraine, and going back to 2013, 2014, you know, getting the CIA getting in there, and our people behind the scenes doing their thing and removing one person of power and bringing in someone that they wanted, and then how that relationship was going to advantage their interests, the interests of our governmental agencies and their plan for the world, and and then and then playing that out over over a decade basically, and in continuing to infringe on this one thing that we keep telling each other that we cannot do, but we keep doing it. And then we just tell the world that, yeah, we're going in, we're going to try to admit Ukraine into NATO. Could that be the reason that war started? And I can see the reasoning for that. It makes sense to me. I mean, so I just, and Biden could have stopped that. That was solely Biden's responsibility. I mean, Kamala doesn't trot off to some foreign land and tell the world that we're going to try to admit Ukraine into NATO without Biden knowing exactly what she's going to say and when she's going to say it, and his administration telling her to say it. I mean, that's how that works when you're the Veep. If you've not seen that show on HBO, you might enjoy it. It's funny as hell. So yeah, I think the Ukraine war would absolutely write Biden off for me as an option. Lawfare. This is tough. This is an interesting one because you see the Democrats all the time saying, uh, democracy is on the ballot, and if you get Trump, you end democracy. And it's interesting because it feels like the left a lot of times says stuff, accuses the other side of exactly what they're doing. So like you see them spouting off at Trump all the time about how he's going to end democracy. But the problem is we experienced 4 years of Trump and we didn't see the end of democracy. Democracy held up quite well. But now you're doing stuff that seems to infringe on democracy more than he did, So I just see this lawfare as kind of an issue. I think it would, I think it would probably disqualify him just for the lawfare. So we're maybe on Afghan, definitely on the border, definitely Ukraine, and yes on lawfare. Inflation in the economy. I mean, this would disqualify him? Probably not. I do think we're experiencing inflation, and I do think the economy is where it's at because of Biden's policies. He pumped so much money into the economy after it was back on its feet again. And people were saying at the time, you do that, you're going to cause inflation. Inflation's going to skyrocket and interest rates are going to need to go up. That's how this system works. Interest rates are, so the, but you're going to cause inflation. That's going to have a whole downstream ramifications on the economy. People were saying that when he was dumping that money into the economy, and he dumped it right in and didn't really need to because Trump had already dumped in a whole shit ton because they felt like they needed to not have like another 1929 depression during COVID. And they did that, and you can make the argument that was necessary. But then Biden just dumps in a whole bunch more, and guess what? We got inflation. But I also understand the economy is super complex, and the president, I don't know. I know they have a lot of impact, but also that I wouldn't necessarily write him off for that. I probably wouldn't like him for that. Would I write him off? I'm not sure. Lawlessness, maybe. There's just too much lawlessness in this country. It's insane. And it's clearly it's from the left. It's clear. I mean, it's the Democratic Party for some reason wants lawlessness. And it is interesting, is it not? I mean, why would you want that? And they have weird arguments for it probably. And it probably has to do, I guess, with social justice, which is really kind of weird. I don't know. I don't understand that one. We need laws. We either have the laws or we don't, and if we need to change the laws, let's change the laws. Like if we're going to make the law that it's okay to go into people's stores and just take stuff uninhibited with no consequences because the people in the judicial system in that area that you've appointed there and you've told them what their policies need to be, that's not going to end well for us. So that's just lawlessness that clearly comes from the left, and Biden's at the top on the left. So I do that the lawlessness that we're experiencing in the country, I would write him off just for that. Diminishing global influence. That's what's happening. America has diminishing global influence. That's a big concern for me. Our country can't pretend like how we got here is just automatic. And we got here for doing certain things and believing certain things. And if we stop doing and believing those certain things, it's going to change. And and what seems like just so anti-American policies in some of these cases, yeah, guess what? Our global influence is diminishing. And that's a big concern for me as a citizen of this country. We have a good thing here. We should keep it going. Funding Iran, I'd totally write them off for that. You go in there and give Iran that kind of a money and redo what had been done in the past with Iran. I just can't. I can't. You can't. I'm not going to vote for you. If you're going to go and do that to Iran and dump millions and hundreds of millions and now billions, they're just making a shit ton of money right now, Iran is. And it's because of what Biden changed. So, and yeah, you bet that funded the Hamas going into Israel. So like, that's a big deal. Iran, they were in a good spot. We should have kept them there. And now we're reaping the consequences. So yeah, that has a lot of ramifications. If president's going to go in and fund Iran like that, I'm just not going to be able to support that. Who's their VP? You know, I would consider that too. The two presidents, who's their VP as of right now? We don't know who Trump's VP is. We know who Biden's VP is, Kamala Harris. I mean, even if you had a healthy president, having Kamala as a VP would just be a total non-starter for me. I don't know her that well. I don't know that much about her. I haven't heard her speak on a lot of things. What I have heard her speak, it seems kind of weird. It seems kind of silly. It seems like maybe she's over her skis. It seems like she would not be prepared to be the president of the United States. It seems like she is most comfortable when she's around sort of these pride events and sort of these sort of, you know, leftist sort of cultish sort of circles of people. I guess that's where she seems kind of the most comfortable, you know, which is kind of weird. You kind of want someone who might be the president of the United States to be the most comfortable at the podium or giving a speech or answering a question or explaining something, or, you know, that's where you kind of want to see them most comfortable. So that's tough for me to have Kamala as a VP, even for a healthy president, let alone Joe Biden. I mean, look, this might not go another 4 years. I think it probably will. I mean, this is a guess, right? Coin toss. I don't know, but I would suspect Biden's alive in 4 years, 4 years, 5 years. I would expect he's alive, but the way it appears that he's deteriorating, you know, the truth is the people that deteriorate like that can deteriorate continually for quite a long time. So I don't know that Biden's necessarily about to die, but he does seem to be like in a vastly declining physical and vastly declining state. And so to have that person be your president that Kamala is the vice president for, that's scary to me. Yeah, that's not good. But that's just my personal opinion. Have yours. His physical and mental state. Yeah, I just look, we talked about this last week. It's not about Biden's age. It's about his physical and mental state. That's what it's about. Okay. It's not about his age. I have no problem with him being 81 and healthy. He's not healthy. So I just wouldn't be able to, you know, to support a president that's clearly not healthy. One of the things that they said on the All In podcast, I believe in their after banner, after having Trump on, someone made the point that the president basically has more influence over foreign policy than it even does over domestic. And so the point they were driving at is like one of the president's most key jobs, one of the most key jobs is how we represent ourselves in the world, you know. And I really see Biden really struggling at that. It just seems like he's struggling at that, you know. It just doesn't seem like that things are going our direction based on how he's leading. But hey, those are my opinions. The debates tonight, that should be fun. I can't wait. It's coming up. UFC 303. Yeah. Okay. So fight is coming up this Saturday, and I forgot to bring my phone down here like an idiot, and I'm stoked. It's a pay-per-view event on a summer night in Nashville, Tennessee, and I am stoked. This was the fight that Conor McGregor is going to be on, and is not because he's got an injury. I'm fine with that because look who we have fighting for the main event of the evening. It is Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka, and watching Alex Pereira fight anytime is just a treat. This dude's a freaking killer. He's so good. He's so well-rounded. He's so big and strong and naturally talented and just a killer. It's so fun to watch Alex Pereira fight. I cannot wait. He's fighting Yuri Prochazka. I just feel like Prochazka is going to get killed. I just feel like he's going to get crushed. You know, I that's how I feel. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but the first two Prochazka fights that I watched of his, he lost. And that was kind of when I was getting to the UFC. And so my first impression of Prochazka in his first two fights that I watched, here's this cool looking dude. He's big, he's strong, he's like a samurai. He's got this hair bun thing going on. It's fantastic. Love it. But he got beat twice, and that just kind of put him in that category a little bit for me. And I know he won his last fight, and look, we'll see. I mean, maybe I'm missing something. You know, maybe we'll see. Prochazka could prove me wrong on Saturday night, but just feels to me like Pereira is going to just crush him. Diego Lopez is fighting in the second to last fight. Love Diego Lopez. And what's crazy is he just fought, though, at UFC Louisville, did he not? Diego Lopez, UFC Louisville fight. I'm sure this was the guy, right? I'm confident. But the reason I'm questioning myself is that wasn't that long ago. So why is he fighting Saturday night? Dustin Stoltzfus fought in Louisville, and good grief, who am I thinking of? Oh, I'm thinking of Rojas. Okay, Rojas fought at the UFC fight night. This is Diego Lopez. Got it. Sorry, guys. All right. Diego Lopez, Stone Cold Killer. Cannot wait to see that fight. Who else do we have on here? We have Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer fighting. So our guy, Dustin Stoltzfus, who was on this podcast a few episodes ago, broke Joe Pyfer's arm in a fight in the last couple years. Won the fight, I guess, when you break someone's arm. But yeah, so Dustin Stoltzfus broke Joe Pyfer's arm, and now Pyfer is, well, he's been healed for, I think, a while. But he's really getting back in again, and he's such a powerful punch he does. So I'm excited to see that fight. The one I'm most excited to see, though, is Peyton Talbot fighting in the first fight of the prelims. Peyton Talbot, I think he's had a couple of fights now in the UFC, but only a couple. I feel like this is his third. Don't quote me on that. But this dude is fun to watch. I kind of feel like I've seen all his fights in the UFC now. He has super great mobility. He's still very young. Super great mobility, good strength, good striking, good on the ground, just the heart of a lion. He takes joy in the sport. He seems to be in the right crowds to sort of optimize his craft, and he just seems like he has a lot of upside. And, you know, who knows? Who knows how, you know, his career goes. But he's also just an interesting dude. He loves to be out in nature. He's very zen, like yoga, and does pole dancing for stretching and exercise and mobility. And you just got to be pretty secure to pole dance, to be honest, you know? And so, yeah, it's crazy. Dude fighting Saturday night, dances on poles for mobility and exercise. And you know what? Go for it, dude. Freaking awesome if you're confident enough to go do that. Not sure I am. Goodbye.